It's 4 o'clock. I'll call the Planning Commission meeting to order. Agenda, well, do we need to state name?
I think we usually do.
Okay.
Adam Tagan, Community Development. Door should stay open.
Lee Tall, commission member.
Stu Wesley, commission member.
Tom Bright, commission member. Dan Hanson, commission member.
Joe Terry, secretary.
Larry Hayes, Wood Trust Bank.
Charlie Andy with Civitech.
Joe Zerflu, Commission Member. Agenda item number 1 is approval of the report for the April 1st, 2019 Planning Commission meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second to approve. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 2, maps and plats received.
We did not receive any this month, so there's no need for that agenda item.
Agenda item number 3 is Plan 19-0350 Wood Trust Bank. The applicant is requesting site architectural plan of operation review for a proposed bank. The subject property is located at 4811 8th Street South, parcel number 34-14097. Whoever wants to start.
I can give a brief overview of the request. If Larry would like to add anything, that might work.
I'm sure you'll do a great job.
Yeah, so site plan review, under the new zoning code, there's the requirement for the site plan review, architectural review, and plan of operation. Rather than making them apply for 3 different things, we just lump it all under one review. So ultimately what they're requesting is to establish a new bank at the corner of 8th Street and Griffith Street. It is within the city limits already. It's currently zoned B2 general commercial. So I tried to go through it and at least highlight the main things that the zoning code has to be looked at through a site plan review process. In general, they're looking at the architectural style, so making sure it's not a big metal barn that's surrounded by nice masonry buildings or something like that. So obviously this architecture is of a high quality and it'll fit in well with the surrounding properties. Just general site layout things like are the dumpsters located, are they properly screened, where are mechanicals, are they properly screened? And then this kind of going back to the style of the building, making sure that the windows and entrances make sense, that it's not out of proportion, that it's what most people think of as a typical commercial building. So the planning staff did review all those items, did not have any concerns, so we didn't make any recommendations on that. We also reviewed the submitted landscape plan and the lighting plan. The landscape plan is a little deficient, so I will be working with Velocic Landscaping just so that to get that bumped up. But I still wanted to give you guys a sense of where it stood in relation to the code. So ultimately, they'll have to add some additional street trees around the perimeter of the property. That can be the northwest. The code also allows it for frontage roads, so that can be also the east or the south if they want kind of run out of room and they want to spread out the trees a little bit more, but additional street trees will be added, and then additional hard surface landscaping will be added. And in talking with the applicant, it sounds like the kind of the stormwater area to the east of the site will probably feature a little bit more landscaping, obviously in a manner that won't impact the viability of that structure, and then probably along the south property line. So they have to submit a revised landscape plan that would meet the minimum requirements prior to getting their building permits for it. Lighting plan that was a little high on the north and south property lines as well, so there's too much light trespass. I'm talking, that's usually something where either they just need to shield it or they need to use a smaller bulb or they can angle the head. There's a lot of options on that. So again, that's more of a technical review, but so I did recommend that they have to revise those 2, and then otherwise just build it as they said they would build it. So planning staff did recommend that.
Do you want to add anything?
Well, we're excited about, investing in the community here. And the items that Adam pointed out, it's our intent, obviously, to take those into consideration and do those things. The landscape, we have no issue with, putting some more trees. The biggest thing the concern we have obviously is, you know, the building itself is kind of our sign, for the main sign, so we don't want to put a lot of big trees where people can't see the building, so, but I think based on the point system, now that I have a better understanding, I don't think that's going to be a problem whatsoever, so. And the lighting, you know, that's kind of out of my forte, but it sounds to me like there's ways to address those concerns as well.
So I guess for approval, what were, in a motion you want, what included in them?
In a motion, assuming you support staff, which is obviously always questionable, but if you do in this case, the motion would be to approve subject to the 4 recommended conditions of approval, which would include revisions to the landscape plan and the lighting plan. I guess the one other thing that has come up in some discussions is Chapter 6 of the municipal code, which is outside of the zoning purview, but it's still tied to site design, does require the installation of sidewalks when a commercial business is developed or a commercial lot is developed. So that is not under your purview because again, it's a different section of the code, but that has been brought to the applicant's attention. So that would be a requirement unless they go through proper channels for a waiver of some sort. But just kind of bring that to your attention because I know that's been another question I've received on it.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with, but as long as there's nothing, no utility poles are just sit in there. I know there's a sidewalk currently on A Street, I believe, that comes down to that intersection, so it seems logical that that would be extended. I don't think there's anything going east-west.
Correct. Not at this time.
There's currently no curb there at all, which we would be putting a curb in.
I motion to approve based on the 4 conditions in the staff report.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve contingent upon changes that Adam pointed out. Any further discussion on the item? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4 is review and discussion on the update to the sign ordinance with Civitech.
Okay.
Unless you want to hang around for sign discussion.
Be good.
Thank you.
You bet.
You didn't even sweat.
Ten? No. Handled every one of those questions.
Charlie, if you want to start us off, then I'll see if I can bring it up, although we probably don't need it up on the screen, do we? Or is there anything that you want us to look at?
The only thing that's really new from the last time we started to kind of talk about the concepts and stuff for the sign code is there's been a court case that has seen some resolution in the small city of Belnor, Missouri. So one of the things that we need to follow is the Reed versus Town of Gilbert. So we have to kind of regulate size of signs rather than content, what's on the sign. But this one is also the number of signs, and this one, basically the owner lives in a single-family home, sued the city in January 2018 alleging the ordinance trammeled his free speech rights. The city cited him because he had 3 signs in his yard. One sign said Black Lives Matter, one sign said Clinton Kane, and a third had a U.S. Senate candidate. Each of the signs is about 18 by 24. The sign restriction of one sign in the residential area is too restrictive of free speech, is his claim. And it seems like the court ruling agreed with his statement. So 11-page court ruling is likely to succeed on the merits of his free speech challenge. So we're keeping an eye on that, and that's really just, that will affect how we kind of take a look at regulating signs. And probably your most restrictive is your residential. That's where you're gonna have the most restrictive sign codes. So again, we'll just kind of keep an eye on that, what kind of size, what kind of number of signs, things like that. So that's just to kind of get us started off. It seems like the courts are going more towards free speech and away from sign ordinances being overly restrictive. You guys are pretty good, have a pretty good balance already. You've done a good job of balancing the rights of property owners to advertise and own a business and things like that. So we'll just kind of keep an eye on it. I don't think it's any huge important deal, but it's something for you to think about as we move forward.
Can you highlight, so for residential right now, what is the recommendation for what signage would be allowed on a residential lot?
I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
Let's see here, I think, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. Let's see, so where was it? So if you go to page 11, on section 46.23, signs not requiring a permit. We have signage for properties owned single-family uses allowed without a permit as follows. So at least right now, the recommendation is area of all signs shall not exceed 12 square feet on single-sided signs or a total of 24 square feet on a double-sided sign. But just to put that in perspective, the court case, that was one sign, so they limited the number versus just saying you have a total square footage that you're allowed, and that was a pretty restrictive one of, what would that be, 3 square feet?
3 square feet, correct.
So this would allow you to have multiple campaign signs, for example. It would allow you to have a real estate sign up while you have a campaign sign, at least the way this is drafted currently. So the real question is, how is 12 square feet enough to allow anyone to voice their opinions and have free speech, or is that still too restrictive? So again, don't need to make decisions necessarily today, but that's something that should be in the back of your head as we continue to monitor this court case.
I think it gives you some confidence too in the decisions that you've made already. You know, you're not too restrictive, you're balancing it. It's, the signs aren't going to be in your face, too big, too obtrusive. So I think that the ordinance that you've drafted so far is well balanced. And that's what the courts are looking at. You know, if they're looking at it as being too restrictive all the way around, then a case like this might win. So.
Like your standard political sign is what, 2 by 2? Does that sound all right, or?
Well, they vary quite a bit, actually, but in the more commercial areas, they're probably 5 by 8, so 40 square feet. In the residential, they're the little squares.
Little
Are,
yard sign.
yeah,
18
they're
by
like
24, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
3 or 4 square feet is pretty normal.
So you could have 3 or 4 of them.
And the only other thing we're monitoring is the towers in the right of way, but that's what we're zoning, but it is this, so.
So another item that they wanted to cover was electronic message board signs. And thoughts on how we wanted to deal with that. If I recall the last discussion, I think we were in the council chambers when we were discussing this. It was, do we want to make the people jump through additional hoops to put up an electric message board? Or is it something that we think we have a fairly good handle on and can basically just have the standards within the code, and as long as you meet A, B, and C, that it's a permitted sign just like any other sign? And so if I'm remembering that discussion correctly, it was where you think we kind of have the standard right now of limiting it to a certain percentage, limiting it to how often you can switch in between messages, making sure that it has the dimmers on the lighting so that it's not excessively bright at 1 in the morning, or it's not the same brightness at 1 in the morning as it is at noon, those type of things. So the way the code was drafted does reflect that, and that is, I believe, found on page. Page 7, yes. So section 4616 would be electric message displays. The way this is drafted is electric message display would still have to be a static image, meaning it's not an animated sign. You're not having, fireworks going off in the background while the message is displayed. It's not a waving flag. I've seen that animation quite a bit. It's not a motorcycle driving across, pulling the text onto the screen. It's just text is there for a certain amount of time and then changes. The recommendation in here is that it has to remain static for 2 minutes. Personally, I think that's a little long from at least what the commission has been going with. They've been, I think the last 3 or 4 has been 7 seconds, has been the recommendation. It's long enough that at average speed, someone can read it before it's changing, but it still allows someone to get multiple messages out if you're stopped at a stoplight or something like that. But it's not so fast that it's distracting. So I don't think 2 minutes is really the direction I would recommend as staff, but again, it's what the intent is. Do you want it to be a changeable message, or is it really just an electronic sign that it's allowing you to change that message daily or weekly versus throughout the course of the day? Because if you're going with a 2-minute time frame, then that's really just gonna be that one message when someone drives by.
I think we should be consistent with, because we've had probably a half dozen, maybe 3, 4 of these in the last few years, and be consistent with all of, because we had a set, list of criteria that we went. I think we should be consistent with that.
And that's the 7 seconds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's 7 seconds now.
Are there DOT restrictions regarding signs that are moving?
The 7 seconds actually came from the DOT standards. That's where I pulled it from when I was doing the research. That seems to be the average that they recommend, so that it's not so fast that you're trying to read it while you're driving.
Yeah, and do they have restrictions as far as how close to the road it can be, or how high, or any of those that we need to comply with?
Well, generally, the DOT regulations are only going to apply on state highways. So we obviously have state highways within the city. Their regulations would supersede anything we have. So we can regulate however we want, but if our regulations are more loose than what would be allowed on the expressway, for example, being State Highway 54, their regulations would still apply. So they would still have to comply.
Do we need to write that in to?
No, that's just pretty standard.
And I think within the city limits, because our highways are connecting highways, I think that the city's ordinances apply. If it was not a,
For sure.
yeah, if it was not a connecting highway, similar to some of the surrounding municipalities that have a state highway go through it, then every sign that's along a state highway has to get a permit from the DOT, which isn't the case for the commercial businesses here in the city of Wisconsin Rapids. So I think it does differentiate based on whether it's a connecting highway, which the city has maintenance responsibilities, the city owns the right of way, versus a state highway that the DOT actually owns the right of way.
So I thought that, when Zerflu put his thing, that it had to get a DOT permit and then, before Quick Trip. I guess I'm thinking that had to go through the DOT, but maybe we were just.
I don't think so.
No, I think the only time that we've involved the DOT since I've been here was the hospital, and that was because of the encroachment
Actually was
issue.
in the,
Yeah, so they had to get a permit from the DOT for that one. But otherwise, locally, no, they haven't. And the city has to get it for our welcome signs, which is a weird thing, but yeah, private business does not.
the other thing to think about with the 7 seconds, it's kind of sectioning off a minute. So 30 seconds down to 15 seconds. If you went 8, then it's 16 and 32. So 7 seconds really is kind of, that's the industry norm, because it keeps it under that 15 seconds, 30 seconds, you know, as they split up. What we found is typically if you're driving normal speeds in town, 25 to 35 miles an hour, 7 seconds is one message if you hit it just right, 2 messages. Typically, if you're on the front end of one, you're on the back end of the other. You know, so you're not going to see 5 messages with 7 seconds. You're only going to see a couple, maybe 3. So it has not been considered obtrusive.
The only other thing that at least was on the memo originally was excessively tall signs. If there is a concern from the commission, is there anywhere in town that you think signs are too tall? Are there set areas that you would like to restrict the height of signs more, to keep them more on scale? Right now, generally speaking, our general business and industrial districts the height is tied to the height of the buildings. So you're allowed up to 35 feet, which would be the highest, or 6 feet above the building is the restriction along A Street, for example, or our industrial parks. When you get into more of our office parks and those type of things, we have a specific height restriction. I believe it's either 15 or 20 feet, depending on the kind of more office, retail type of environment. But I'm just kind of curious if there was any feedback on that from the commission on where we want to land on sign height. Any thoughts?
I guess my only concern, and we dealt with it in our old code, is coming to an agreement at a certain threshold that you need to have, engineered foundations on these things so that it's not a public safety concern of somebody just coming in and putting in a tall sign and without the proper foundations on these things, and it falls over and hurts somebody.
I want to say we landed on 15 feet.
15 feet sounds, between 15 and 20 is what we,
Now that you say that, I did not see it in this code. I did not see that language.
Okay.
Basically, an engineer's stand.
It's easy to add. Anything over 15 feet.
yeah.
And then obviously, any thoughts on size, style? Obviously, it's getting harder and harder to regulate some things with signage. Are there concerns? Basically, the table that I handed out tonight and that was originally provided, it reflects for the most part the size and height and those type of bulk regulations that are currently within the current sign code. The highlighted areas are going to be the new districts that were added through the new zoning code. So those would be 100% new. But I guess that's kind of one of the major outstanding things are, do we want to deal with anything with quality of signs? And do we want to deal with anything on size of signs? Or are people content with where things are currently? And I can go district by district if you want, or I didn't know if anyone felt strongly on that.
Thank you.
Or is everything wonderful?
How's it going?
I just have the joy of enforcing.
Anything of note with the highlighting on this?
Those are just really the new regulations, if you want to think of it that way. So the B3 district is a whole new district that wasn't in. Same with the institutional and the B1 district. And then the language that is highlighted is recommended language from Tim, just really trying to firm up some things that he thought were lacking. So at least in the neighborhood commercial, the consultant's thought was to somewhat reflect what is allowed, but be more restrictive than it is in the B2 district, since that's really meant to be more neighborhood scale. So you're not talking about a full-blown commercial strip center or Walmart. You're going to have a much smaller scale type of commercial business, so that is more restrictive than the B2 district. The one district I always struggle with, quite honestly, is the B5 district. That's, to put that in perspective, the Aspirus Doctors Clinic, Marshfield Clinic, those type of large users are within the B5 district. They're obviously high-quality buildings, they're large-scale buildings, but we have a very restrictive sign allotment as for what they can have for signage. The way it reads right now is you're only allowed 80 square feet of signage total for that business, which if that's just a freestanding sign, that's probably reasonable because you can still get a nice monument sign that's not going to look overly large at 80 square feet, but if that's also including a logo or something on the building, it begins to maybe be a little more restrictive than was originally intended. At least I've heard noises from these people that it's a little more restrictive maybe than was originally intended. So I don't know if there's some thought that maybe keeping the restrictions on the freestanding signage so that, again, you're getting the higher quality monument style signs that you want to see in an office park, but maybe opening up it so that they can put more on the buildings themselves. Utilize, much like Larry said earlier for Wood Trust, a lot of times for those type of businesses, the building is their sign, but they still want their logo or a name somewhere on there. And if you're dealing with a 100,000 square foot building, a little 4x4 sign probably doesn't really look proportional always. But that would be the one district, at least that I would ask that the commission maybe think about over the next month or two as we're getting closer to finalizing this.
So basically, we could word it, maximum area of all other signs, 80 square feet, and then maximum area of, instead of it saying specific sign type, it could say maximum area of wall sign, and come up with a number there. That would be one way to give them that ability.
Yeah, I don't know if you need to go to the full 15% of the building face like you get in the general business, but maybe a 5% of the building face or something that would be a little more open-ended.
Quick question on the sidewalk signs. Is there a reason why the maximum height and the maximum width, we go with a lesser maximum area as opposed to just allowing a 12 square feet by? Is there a reason to make people think about?
I honestly don't remember if there was a rationale behind that or if it was just random picked. Or if I researched at that point what an average sandwich board kind of sign was.
I guess my thought for the 4 square feet to just go have the maximums and just, so you look at if it's 3x4, you know it's good kind of thing versus you're out there with a tape measure looking at 3.5 by something. Be easier enforcement.
Makes sense. Obviously, those are only, at least now, allowed in the downtown district because they would be within the right-of-way. That would be a permitted encroachment. There is language within the code that they have to get, basically name the city as an additional insured in order to be doing that because we are allowing that obstruction within the right-of-way.
maybe
So
that's why.
that's just not for restaurants or anymore then? Or,
This one is not restricted to the type of business, no,
so anyone could get in front of their business on a sidewalk?
within the downtown.
So then do you want to have, wouldn't you want to keep like maximum height just for obstruction reasons or no? Or is that not a concern with what you're saying?
The only comment I had is that I think our maximum area should be some product of our.
Oh.
So you're using like 12 square feet
Okay.
instead of 8.
Yeah, you know, just so
Yeah.
that when you look at it, that your heights and your widths, if you're at your maximums, that you're not having another one that you have to look at to say, oh, okay, now are we,
Well, of course, the only problem with that is it reduces the flexibility of the person making the sign.
Well, it doesn't have to be 12 square feet though, it can still be,
That's a maximum.
Sure. That's a pretty big sign.
3 by 3 by 3 by
These
3.
are
nine-
on public,
nine square
not
feet.
just on their own sidewalks, on public property?
correct.
But what is the width of our normal sidewalk, and plus with the, you have to leave a certain amount of,
Yeah, the code requires 5 feet of clearance, so if you want to put it on, you still have to keep 5 feet of sidewalk space. And it's either got to be up against the curb or it's got to be up against the building. So it can't be right smack dab in the middle of the sidewalk.
In the tracks.
Those are found on page 10. Bottom of page 10, top of page 11 deals with sidewalk signs. And for the most part, this is word for word what's in our current code.
but it wasn't for any business, though.
Well, it's just the sidewalk cafes that are restricted, but the sidewalk signs were always allowed for any business. At least I think, I'll double check our. Yeah, there's no restriction on business type in the current code.
In the old sign code.
Right.
so with the requirement of having the additional insurance, is there any other, like, should we have some other kind of like staff permitting approval for these to kind of, since that, getting an insurance, having an insurance requirement, kind of like to make sure that that is actually there versus, I'm just thinking of like some kind of control mechanism like this.
Yeah, you would still need a pull a sign permit.
Okay.
So there still would be a staff review. I don't know how, Joe, you feel about requiring, because you have, what is your right-of-way occupancy permit or something along that line? I don't know if that would be redundant to require that as well.
I don't think so. You know, because generally, nothing is allowed in the right-of-way. I mean, there are some special exceptions, there are some signs that are there that are, you know, have been for a long, long time, and they've been allowed to continue. I don't think there's redundancy there at all.
And would you require the proof of insurance through that process?
If it were physically located in the right-of-way, yes.
Yeah. Maybe we could clean that up, and there's redundant language here, basically just require them to get the right-of-way occupancy permit and then make sure that the two work together.
But these generally aren't allowed in the right-of-way.
Well, that's what this section allows.
Oh, for like your sidewalk?
Yeah, sidewalk. Only the sidewalk
Right.
signs, only in the
And only
downtown
in that
district.
specific district.
Yeah. The only other sign that's allowed in the right-of-way per this code would be a projecting sign, like a marquee in front of a
Right.
movie theater, which I don't think we currently have any marquees that project anymore that I can picture in my mind.
And these are temporary, correct?
The sidewalk, yes, they're basically a sandwich board sign that has to come in and out when the business is open.
Yeah, I wonder if we should reference this ordinance in the right-of-way occupancy ordinance for that particular activity. I think otherwise it could be inconsistent and challenging maybe to enforce and, because again, that right-of-way occupancy permit is generally designed towards construction type activities, utility type activities, and not, signing and zoning type activities.
What's the chapter of your codes that right away is?
It's like a chapter 6. Streets and sidewalks.
Yeah, I'll see if I can get the exact.
Okay.
I've got some like little minor things that I'll follow up with you and Tim on.
Okay, sounds good.
But I don't think the whole commission needs to maybe go through the little itty things. Yes.
So that's kind of the debate, is that 8 square feet maximum versus more. And how would you like us to draft it?
I just questioned why our maximum area wasn't the product of, from an enforcement standpoint. That way, if you go out and you know that you're less than both of those, then you're not sitting there having to do another, but I don't really, it just seems a little weird to me.
Have you had anybody discuss it?
That if we're good with the height and we're good with the width, why wouldn't we be good with the overall area?
Well, again, I think that's just because the overall area is the key amount, but there may be occasions where you want a sign or can deal with a sign that's wider than it is high, or vice versa, but that isn't, 12 square feet might be a little too big for most sidewalk type signs. This just allows more flexibility in the design of the sign. But I
guess I don't understand why going to 12 is more restrictive than 8.
It's less restrictive than 8.
Yeah.
But it gives them a little more creative ability. Instead of saying 2 foot by 4 foot, you could make it as wide as 3, but a little shorter than or whatever, so that you don't exceed the 8 feet. But again,
My question is where does the 8 come from?
And I just don't remember when this was last updated. I don't remember if that was a discussion item or if it was just a number drawn out of a hat, or I just don't remember.
And if we don't remember, it really doesn't matter.
Right.
It's what you
Yeah.
think it should be.
Yeah. If we have 2 arbitrary numbers, why not just make it the product of those 2 arbitrary numbers and let them go within that, unless there was some other really good reason that, 4 extra square feet is too much on the sidewalk for information.
Well, this is confusing, because you're saying, you can only have 8 square foot. But then it says, the maximum height could be 4 by 3. That's 12.
Well, but like in some of the other things, the maximum might be 25 and the maximum width might be 50, but you're not gonna allow a 25 by 50 square feet.
And that makes sense, but these are so small, it's like,
Well, but the
what is the-
sandwich, the sidewalk is only so big anyways, and you need 5 feet, and, I don't know, a 2 by 4, 3.5 by 2.5, I mean, I think.
So if you go 4 foot high, then you're restricted to 2 foot wide, when it says you can have 3 foot wide.
Well,
I think that the
Right, that's what I mean though.
The 5 foot is going to be the most restricting thing for them. Because there's not a lot of places downtown where your sidewalk is, pushing.
I think the thing that probably restricts them more than anything is that they got to bring it in and take it out in their opening hours, so it's the weight of the sign. So, with new construction and new techniques and stuff, you can get a pretty light sign that's 8 or 12 square feet. I guess it's an aesthetic thing.
Mhm.
It really is, and that's up to you as a commission to kind of discuss whether you want it to be 8 or 12. It's just an aesthetic thing, that's all.
So looking at, just really quick, pulling up another Wisconsin City sidewalk sign regulation. You know, in this particular case, they're more concerned about how much room is there still on the sidewalk. You know, they're requiring that there has to be 48 inches of clear passage and 24-inch clearance from the curb. You know, so a little different scope maybe to accomplish the same thing. I mean, if that's something,
That's 4 feet, and ours requires 5 feet.
right?
So,
And the typical sidewalk is how wide?
5 feet. Well, but downtown is different.
right.
8.
There's some sections that are probably 10 or more,
More.
but I think probably the minimum you see when the street has been reconstructed is 8 feet.
Well, we can leave it as is, or we can change it in the drafting, and you can kind of think about it, because we got a lot to do. So we'll keep moving, unless you direct us to change that, which we certainly can easily do that, but we can keep moving.
Any other thoughts on size, height, percentages? I guess kind of that big table. And I think it comes back to, as you're driving around town, it always comes back to, are there signs that you look at that really, really bother you? And is it something that this code can address legally? And if so, making sure that this language supports what the commission and ultimately the council want to see for these commercial areas. I know this code is more restrictive than it was when I first started, so it did get a little bit more restrictive when we redid it in 2013.
And it's addressed, and I think your enforcement is addressed, but I can tell you that the one that bothers me the most is when you see the open sign that is red and blue and flashing,
Yeah.
because it looks like a squad car.
Yeah, and that's
Those have been addressed, but
There's one on 8th just up the expressway. I
Is it
notice
still-
all the time?
is it still
I
flashing?
don't know. I just remember seeing it in the
Yeah.
but because
On the
every time
corner.
I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
they're open.
Certainly gets your
Slam on
attention.
brakes.
Yeah, one of those things where you enforce it, they behave for a week, and then they flip that switch again. And so I will not take offense if you see one, let us know and we will go and talk to them again. I admittedly avoid A Street at night, so I don't notice the flashing open sign maybe as much as I should.
Enforcement blinders that we put on when we go in the cars.
It's the only way to keep your sanity.
I think just going up and down 8th Street, it's the height of the signs.
Okay.
That is the big thing.
So would there be the desired, like I said, right now it's tied to the height of the building or 35 feet, whichever is more restrictive. Is there the desire of the commission to have just a maximum height regardless of the scale of the building?
I think so.
Such as let's see, like B5, the maximum height is restricted to 10 feet for a single tenant, 20 feet for a multi-tenant sign? Something more along that line versus, obviously, anytime you're making a drastic change like that, it grandfathers in all those other ones. And so
Other ones,
those will
right.
remain to be there as long as they're not basically discontinued or removed voluntarily. Because a lot of times you can keep changing out the faces and the structure itself can stay in a non-conforming state. But moving forward, you can be more restrictive.
Right.
Just thinking about, sight lines and safety of, making sure that the signs are lower to the ground, it's more of a, so you want to make sure you're still getting those good sight lines when you have people pulling out of them, not blocking, the sights coming from the ground. Which is an advantage of a taller sign, is you get that up out of where people are driving.
required to meet the vision clearance triangle restrictions. One recommendation I would have would be that that would just refer to our site triangle regulations in the zoning code, rather than having two different.
I think there's also a reference elsewhere in the ordinance also, might be in right-of-way management
For site triangles.
for site triangles.
Because I know we adopted a sliding scale in the zoning code. So if it's an alleyway or a driveway in a street, it's 10, I want to say. And then if it's two minor streets, I believe it's 20. And if it's anything more major than that, I believe it's a 40-foot vision triangle. That's how it currently sits. For vision triangles. And if these are things that you need to think about and report back to me as a staff person, that's fine. We don't have to make the final decisions tonight by any means. But now
Vision
that-
triangles too, I'll reference the engineering department and we'll see if there's reference to some dimensions elsewhere. You know, at the end of the day, I think they should all reference one spot in the ordinance so that
Right.
it only gets changed once.
Yeah. So we ran into that with our fence code, because it said one thing and we had more restrictive elsewhere.
So that's kind of the discussion on the height is, if they can be tall enough, you can see under them, that's even more flexible than what the vision triangle requirements are. So it's better vision, if you will. Whereas it's more professional or more aesthetic if they're more monument style signs, which the height requirement of 10 feet kind of almost forces the monument style sign. So what did you say, B5 allows up to 10 for multiple, up to 20 for multiple tenants. And right now, this one allows up to 35. So square footage,
Maximum is 200 square feet.
so 20 by 10 is 200 square feet. 20-foot height, you could have a 20 by 10 and then 10 feet underneath. If it's a 10-foot height, more than likely it's going to be mostly line. Come on in. So those are kind of the things to think about if you were considering adjusting that. 35 foot is pretty tall, and that's pretty loose as far as sign restrictions historically that that's, you know, we have 35 to 50 foot along the interstates in La Crosse, but nothing higher than 20 feet anywhere else.
And that is something that carried over from the very old code. The height restriction was not adjusted the last time the code was amended. So it may be time. That's what I'm thinking.
Would you like 20 feet?
I don't think we want to discuss what my feelings are.
Or make it 35 to the bottom of the sign and just get them out of the way.
Ah, there you go. So that no one can see them as they're driving.
Yeah, nobody
down
sees
the
them out
street.
there.
It's a low-flying effort.
But yeah, I think 20 to 25 feet is fairly standard, especially along a commercial corridor. So that still does give some variation so that one person can put up a sign, the neighbor can put up a sign, and ideally you can adjust your height so you're not blocking.
Yeah, I think it would be, my view is maximum height, and that's it, you know. No size of building, everything else.
It makes it easier from an enforcement standpoint. It's one number. I don't have to go back to the office, get a blueprint out,
Yeah.
figure out that the building height is 12 feet, so, oh, no, you're not allowed 20 feet here, you're only allowed
And
18.
then you got the up and down, you know. And that's too distracting when you're driving.
So we have a precedent for starting at 10 and going to 20 with two tenants, or you could just start at 20 and not worry about number of tenants. A couple different ways you could go if you want to limit the height to a number.
I'm fine just limiting it to like, bring it down to 20 feet and having that set. I mean, because, that, I agree, not having it tied to the height of the building, that seems,
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, that your vehicle heights don't vary much. And that's what you're trying to attract are the, motorists and pedestrians, so. That 20, 25 feet, you get taller than that and you're looking away from the road.
So currently that 35 feet or the height of the building is in the B2, FM1 and M2 district. So
Do you have any idea what the height of the sign is at the new Pick and Save, Old Cops? Can you throw out that figure?
That one's gotta be at least 30, if not taller.
Mm-hmm. It's too tall.
So is that kind of general consensus, 20 feet in those three districts?
I'd say yes.
I'm fine with 20.
I'll go. Okay, we'll make that drafting change again. We can keep it in our heads as we keep moving forward and making adjustments. Anything else?
What do you think? Oh, I could keep going all night, but I got things on the next agenda, so. But again, I would just, from my standpoint, encourage you guys to keep your eyes open, and if something strikes you, by all means, give me a call, shoot me an email, and I can collect it and disseminate it to the entire commission at our next meeting, or give that feedback back to the consultant, so that they're prepared for the next time. Quite honestly, if there aren't major concerns with where we're at, we're pretty close to being done. There's not a lot left to do. Unless there's something glaring that you think is missing. If you have questions on a certain type of sign, how that's regulated. I guess the only other thing that I would ask you to think about is currently we allow special event signage, which is really the only time that you should be seeing flags or banners or the blowy up guy, or however you want to think about those. Those are meant to be grand openings or a large sale type of event. Is that something we want to continue to allow or not? Or, and the question for the consultant would be how much we can restrict those, or if it's just a square footage type of thing that we have to allow those or not. So I guess that's usually permanent signs. People either like them or don't like them, but the ones that seem to really annoy people or bring out the most comments that I receive are the temporary style, whether it's just a stick in the ground, or like I said, whether it's the flag, banners, pennants, blow-up guys. So I guess that's the other homework I would give you guys to think about.
People get jealous of the dance moves that blow-up guy can do.
I don't. Probably it. They have to complain because they can't do better.
So we'll probably start to take a look at a public rollout, so we can gather public comments based on the drafting that you've done. Right, soon?
Yeah, I would think so.
So start to take a look at some dates and locations where we want to kind of do open house type things or something like that.
And we'll put that on the agenda for next month, if that's okay, or the next time you meet, to have a discussion on timing, format that you would like to see for that public input session. And then we can kind of have the final walkthrough of the code before rolling it out. If that is acceptable to everyone.
Okay, item number 5 is adjournment.
To adjourn.
Second.
Motion second to adjourn, all in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.